Hi guys. So there are three different kinds of dependent clauses. That's what we talked about last time, was the dependent clause. And this time we are going to talk about one of those types of dependent clauses. That is the adverb clause. I was going to say that maybe you see the adverb clause more often than you see the others. I know that I usually think of an adverb clause whenever I think of a dependent clause. My brain just automatically goes to an adverb clause, but I don't know if that's true or not. But hopefully you guys will get a really good handle on these, and hopefully they'll be very easy for you. Now, when you have an adverb clause, it does the same thing that an adverb does. It modifies a verb. Now, when you're just using an adverb in a sentence that's just a one little word, like the word quickly or the word very, it could modify a verb, an adverb, or an adjective. When you have adverb clauses, you're mostly modifying verbs, so don't worry about that other stuff. And you really probably won't even have to worry too much about whether it modifies a verb or not, because you can usually identify them whether you know what word they're modifying or not. And the easy way to identify them is by the word that starts the clause starter, okay? I'm going to show you guys, I wrote some down. Okay. Oh, wow, I've got my window, the sun is shining brightly this morning. Okay, it's kind of making a glare. So here are some clause starters: when, where, while, as, since, if, although, because. You might say, when I was young. Now, you can see that's a dependent clause because it needs more information. It can't stand alone on its own. You might say, where my mother went to school. Okay. Normally you would end a sentence with that one, right? You would say, Sullivan Elementary is where my mother went to school. Okay. But do you see those words when and where? Sometimes we use those to begin questions. And in that case, they are still independent clauses. I think I talked about that in the last video. When did you get here? That can still totally stand alone on its own. The only time when and where are dependent clause starters is when they're part of a bigger sentence and they cannot stand alone on their own, okay? But you can see that all of these words will begin a clause that won't be able to stand alone on its own. Let's pick another one. Because you are my best friend. Okay, so we need more there. You guys will see that in the section coming up. You'll be able to see which ones stand alone and which ones don't. The ones that are dependent and do not stand alone on their own all start with words like this. Okay, these are your adverb clause starters. When you see a word like this, you know you're getting ready to, the whole clause will modify a verb, okay? It'll modify one of the verbs in the independent clause, okay? So there's a lot of words up here. An easy way to memorize these is to look at this little mnemonic here, www.asia.because. Now that will help you remember the www.asia, okay, .because. If you want to remember more, then you can add the last four, unless, until, before, and after. So now you've got when, where, while, as, since, if, although, because, unless, until, before, and after. I would go ahead and memorize this one unless it's too difficult. And then at least memorize this one because it will really give you a head start on being able to immediately identify dependent clauses, especially adverb clauses. Okay? So once you guys know this stuff, you are ready to take section 1. I hope it's easy for you. Okay, I do want to add one more thing before you take section 1. Hopefully you haven't taken it yet. I did have one student who took this quiz forget that every clause needs a subject and a verb. So whenever you're looking at section 1, make sure you pick a clause that has a subject and a verb, but you're still picking the dependent clause, so you're looking for that dependent clause starter, okay? Okay, for section 2, all you have to do is look out to see whether the adverb clause comes first in the sentence or whether the independent clause comes first in the sentence. Remember that an adverb clause is a dependent clause, okay? It's just one of the types. So if the adverb clause comes first, here it says, when I returned home, now that is an adverb clause. It's a dependent clause. It can't stand alone on its own as a sentence. It still has a subject and a verb, I returned, but there's not enough information there for it to be independent. Tiffany, what does it say? Tiffany came out to greet me. Okay, so that is independent. You could just say Tiffany came out to greet me, and that would be a sentence all by itself. That's independent. So here in this example, the adverb clause comes first and the independent clause comes second. Okay, When that happens, you have to have a comma after the adverb clause. Okay? When I returned home, comma, Tiffany came out to greet me. Okay? Now, if you were to flip those around, Tiffany came out to greet me when I returned home, you no longer need a comma. So if your independent clause comes first, and then it's followed by an adverb clause, you don't need a comma at all. Okay? So this rule is one that I see people making mistakes with all the time in their writing. If you can remember to check to see which kind of clause comes first, you will know whether it needs a comma or not. Okay? Sometimes I see too many commas. In this case, they'll add a comma when they don't need one. And sometimes I see this case where they just forget to put their comma in. So if you can look out for these things, you'll have a head start on being a better writer, or at least knowing your punctuation better. Having poor punctuation doesn't mean you're not a good writer. Some people write really interesting stories or interesting reports, and there's still a lot of punctuation or grammar corrections that I can make to that, but they're still a really, really good writer because they write interesting things. So don't feel too badly about that. Just try to wrap your head around this stuff so that later on, if you do want to write something and you do want to have an audience, people can take you seriously and know that you have done. I think whenever you have better writing skills, people trust you more to have done your research. I don't know. Maybe that's kind of a silly thing, but I think it's good to do your best, and then you'll have a little bit more respect, I think. Okay? So the part coming up is the section 2. You will be saying, okay, which one comes first, the adverb clause or the independent clause? Now, if you look out for these clause starters, when, where, while, as sensitive, although, because, until, unless, what was the other before and after, then you can know that you're getting ready to start dependent clause. So dependent clause comes first, followed by the independent. And then you're also going to mark whether it gets commas. If the dependent, the adverb clause is first, it does get a comma. If the independent clause is first, it does not. Okay, so you guys are ready to take this one, this quiz that I'm going to link to. And please leave me feedback. Negative feedback is okay too. I just want to make these as good as I can for you guys. I'll see you next time. Okay, bye.